you for all coming this afternoon. And can I say a huge thank you to Arshat for all his organising work, effort he's put into this, and all the volunteers that helped to put on today's event, because no event like this happens without an enormous amount of effort going into it. And so I also want to just say a point of history, really. We're having this event today in Bradford, and I'll be talking about your party, why we founded it, and what the prospects are for the future. Bradford is a place that has a very special position in the history of the Labour movement, in the history of socialist ideas and radical ideas. It's where the Independent Labour Party was founded. It's where many of the nation's peace movements come from. It's where Bradford University has its Department of Peace Studies. It's a place of great solidarity with mill workers in the past, and industrial workers later on, and there's this incredible history of the radicalism of West Yorkshire, which is absolutely part and parcel of the political life of the whole of Yorkshire, and particularly of West Yorkshire. So we tread in the path of those that went before, and underwent great hardship in forming political organisations based on socialist clubs in villages as a way of providing an alternative to the brutality of Victorian capitalism, the poverty that went with it, the discrimination that went with it. And so they formed trade unions, they formed socialist societies, they formed organisations in order to fight back and bring about change. So every time I think of the National Health Service and somebody criticises the National Health Service, I delve back in my memory and mind to those people that had a vision of a society that provided care for those that need it, free at the point of need, because it's the duty of the community to help everybody else when they need it. That's a principle of socialism, and that was a principle behind them and behind the foundation of our National Health Service. Let's not ignore our history, but be proud of our history and understand it, and so that our party does become very much part and parcel of the community. My own experience in the Labour Party has been a very interesting one. I spent most of my life as a member of the Labour Party, and eventually I became leader of the Labour Party, much to the chagrin of the vast majority of the Parliamentary Labour Party and almost every one of the national officials of the party and every single one of the national media in this country. So it was fun. And it was nice being alone on many of those occasions. But I was determined to represent the views of people that had taken part in that leadership election and joined the Labour Party because they wanted to see an alternative. And if you think about the history of that period, I'm writing about it at the moment, around 91% of the media were hostile. 5% were neutral, which meant 4% were possibly positive to what we're trying to do. We went into the 2017 election on only 24% support across the whole country. Now, if Starmer had 24% now, he'd be popping champagne corks, wouldn't he? And so we went into the election on 24%. And at that point, I remember my office saying, what are we going to do now? I said, we're going to go out there, we're going to hold rallies in every town, we're going to campaign, we're going to excite people and mobilise people. And we put that support up to 41% during the period of that campaign. And that was because we were able to offer a vision of a slight soupçon of a vision of what the world could be like. And people didn't have to live in poverty and debt, didn't have to live in an over-expensive privately rented flats and so on. There was so much more in that. And so we did all that. Eventually we all know what happened, and we lost the 2019 election, but still got a higher percentage of votes than any other time, a higher vote rather, than any other time this century for Labour. And I was then eventually removed from the Labour Party for a number of appalling accusations that were made against me, all of which were wrong and unfounded. And I was then reinstated as a member, but denied access to the Parliamentary Labour Party. So as Arshat said, I then stood as an independent in Islington North. And I want to say thank you to the hundreds of people from all over the country that came to Islington to help in that election. We confounded them. We won that election and proved that you can win by putting forward radical policies, and I'm forever proud of the last leaflet we did in which to counteract the disgusting and disgraceful message from Reform and the appeasement of Reform by every other party. We put on the front of the leaflet, refugees are welcome here. So we tried to put a sense of humanity around it. Then the issues were about forming a new political party. Now I've just finished my pantomime season in Islington where I became the Wizard of Oslington. So I'm a wizard, or was, season's over. And in that, the line I used was, I formed a new party, but it's a bit harder than you think. And so we have formed a party, we have recruited a very large number of members, we're now going through the structural issues and the election for the committee of the party and all that, and we are recognised and registered with the Electoral Commission and so on. But people are not going to vote for our party or support our party unless we are part and parcel of the community at all times, for the good days and the bad. We're there fighting alongside the community to protect hospitals, to protect children's centres, to protect parks and open spaces. We're there trying to improve people's lives, and we're alongside people on those day-to-day struggles, a community-based and community-organised party. They're also going to want to know what we're going to do. What we're going to do about the issues of poverty and inequality within our society. I'm angry that there are 4 million children living in poverty. I'm angry that it took so long to get even something so simple as the 2-child benefit cap lifted. I'm angry at the levels of privatisation that are going on within the National Health Service. I'm angry that there is no proper social care system in the whole country that provides everyone with access to social care as and when they need it on exactly the same principles as the National Health Service. These are the kind of policies that I want your party to adopt. The ones that we will campaign on. The ones concerning public ownership of water, of transport, of energy. Ones that really empower people and democratise their lives. That surely is what we have to be about. But we also have to be aware of the trends that are going on in society. And there are 2 very nasty trends going on. One is the move to the far right, the growth of Reform, the growth of the blame culture, and going to communities that are up against it because of deindustrialisation ever since Margaret Thatcher. Then Farage and Reform turn up and say it's all the fault of refugees and it's all the fault of migrants. Then they produce the sort of disgusting legislation which you spoke about earlier today, and say, well, it's all the fault of migrants. Well, if any of them ever went into a hospital, they would find that if people hadn't moved to this country and made their homes here and worked in our National Health Service, on our transport systems, in our schools, we wouldn't have much of a health service, we wouldn't have a care service, we wouldn't have much of a transport system, we wouldn't have much of an education system either. The wealth and the living standards we all enjoy are in part provided by people who have moved to this country, made their homes here, and made a fantastic contribution to our society and our world. And we should never ever be afraid to say that or apologise to say that. That is what we have to do. The other thing I've noticed over the last 18 months since this government came into office, I've noticed it before, and to some extent under Tony Blair, is this rush towards authoritarianism in our society. I remember when Blair tried to introduce the 90-day rule, 90 days detention without trial for people on suspicion of terrorist offences. We defeated that because a substantial number of Labour MPs rebelled against it, and we linked up with some small number but important Conservative MPs, Liberal Democrats and others, and we managed to defeat that appalling proposal. What we now have is something equally insidious, an attempt to end trial by jury for most offences within our society, to fundamentally remove legal rights. And as Yvonne was pointing out, to arrest people by use of anti-terror legislation merely for holding placards and signs up, and then put them in prison, in many cases due to be in prison for at least another year before they have their time and day in court, actually amounts to the equivalent of administrative detention within our society. Our civil liberties are not going to be removed by the stroke of a pen on one particular day. They're going to be taken away, bit by bit, clause by clause, move by move, until there is the idea that you can't go and demonstrate, you can't speak out, you can't say what you believe, because there will be somebody coming up to tell you you can't do it, and if necessary, arrest and imprison you as a result of it. So we need to stand up for those rights and those liberties, because if we don't, they will be taken away and they will be destroyed. And so Farage tried one of his tricks in Parliament, a private member's bill, to remove Britain from the European Convention of Human Rights and leaving the European Council. I used to be a member of the European Council. This is not the European Union, it's not the equivalent of what used to be called the Common Market. It's the Council of Europe, which represents all parliaments across Europe. And it is the custodian of the European Convention of Human Rights and elects judges to the European Court of Human Rights, which they conveniently keep calling a foreign court. It's not. It's part and parcel of the judicial system of every one of the member states. And it's helped in many ways to get anti-discrimination measures in place. It's been a court of last resort for people that have been, whose human rights have been abused in many countries. And so I just assumed, since Keir Starmer is apparently a human rights lawyer, and assumed that because he told us he's a human rights lawyer, that he believed in international law and justice, that he would be opposed to Farage's plan. And so when it came to a vote, Labour MPs were instructed to abstain. In other words, to allow Farage to win. Well, I voted against it, as did the Independent Alliance group of MPs, as did some Labour MPs, including Imran Hussain from this borough. He was one of those that voted against it. And we managed to defeat Farage's proposal quite narrowly. But something really worried me, that we had a government that was saying it was not prepared to stand up for a significant part of our civil libertarian law. That is a dangerous place to be in. And so there's much more campaigning to do on that. So our party has to work on all of these issues, mobilise people, educate people, and promote community activities. Those community activities are music, our theatre, our history, our life. It is being part and parcel of the community, and that's exactly what we intend to be. And I'm determined that your party will be big, will be effective, and will be, I hope, powerful. It's also not a point of competition with every other party that's on the scene. It's not a point of competition with every other independent group around the country. So that means there has to be a working together, and the words Yvonne used was, it's a no-brainer. If you want to win an election, and it's a first-past-the-post system, you need one candidate you can vote for, because there are plenty of others you would want to vote against. If you've got a whole choice of candidates to vote for, all saying roughly the same thing, then you're all going to lose. It's pretty obvious. And so we do need that serious, intelligent, recognised debate at a local level to make sure that we go into this immediate election campaign on that basis. The elections are going to take place for your party committee very soon. The nominations close the end of next week, and then we have the discussion period, and then we have the vote taking place, and the committee will be elected. At that point, we'll then have a structure, and we can develop the structure from then on. That is the important part of it. And my plea is that we work together with the independent groups all over the country that have done such fantastic work on local authorities. And we go into the council elections where they're being held in May of this year. Determined to build council housing, determined to be a voice for regulation, including rent control in the private rented sector, determined to be a voice in planning decisions that allows council housing to be built, not property and land and buildings handed over to the private sector for yet more free market developments. For councils that are serious about environmental sustainability, serious about improving the lives of so many people, serious about doing something for young people in our society who grow up having so little, demanding so little and getting so little, except getting massively into debt if they manage to get to university. That's why I was very proud in the general election manifestos I put forward to say that we would end student fees altogether and pay for education from the community as a whole, from cradle to grave, to show that we value education. These things are very, very important, and that is exactly what we're going to be doing. I'll have to finish in a moment because this wedding venue is going to do what it does, have a wedding. So I don't know if there's like a couple are in here at the moment, but it will be some along in a minute. I just want to say a couple of other brief words before I stop. The last week has been amazing and horrendous on the international scene. Venezuela has been under threat from the US for a very long time, that we know. It's had sanctions against it for a long time, that we know. And it had a US aircraft carrier on its coast for several weeks, that we know. They then went in and kidnapped the president and took him away. And Trump said, that's okay, I can do that because I'm the USA. It is a breach of every single aspect of international law. And it has to be condemned for that. And Trump went on to say he was threatening Colombia, he went on to say he was threatening Cuba, he went on to say he was threatening Mexico, and in his new national strategic strategy, he's saying that any country to the south of the USA on the American continent is fair game for the USA to take it over. Is it going to be Colombia next? Is it going to be Mexico next? Is it going to be Cuba next that finds it's got US soldiers on its land and its president taken away? These are extremely dangerous times. And the attack, or now proposal that they take over Greenland on the basis that they don't take it over, somebody else might, is an extremely dangerous prospect indeed. So we need to be mobilised on the international scene. I was over in Leeds this morning to speak at the Palestine rally, and I pointed out there that Imran, Richard Bergen and myself and a number of other MPs, particularly those in the Independent Alliance Group, have week in, week out, day in, day out, raised the issue in Parliament of British participation in the genocide by the supply of weapons and arms to Israel, by the diplomatic cover that Britain has given to Israel. And hang their heads in shame, those politicians that have defended the supplying of arms to Israel, knowing full well that acts of genocide have been committed, knowing full well that 70,000 people have been killed in Gaza, and when the bodies are finally removed from the rubble, we could be talking of 100,000 deaths. And there have been already 1,000 breaches of the so-called ceasefire agreement. And so our support for the Palestinian people is total and complete. Our recognition for Palestine is total and complete, and our solidarity with the Palestinian people in Gaza, the West Bank, and the refugee camps in Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria is absolutely there. And so mobilisation and support is important. Often feel very frustrated. We go to the demonstration, go to the rallies, and then you think, well, what have I done? I've just been to a demonstration. Then you get a call from somebody in Gaza or the West Bank who just says, thank you for turning up, and thank you for giving us some hope that we're not alone. And so keep on, keeping on in support of the Palestinian people until they're free from occupation and able to decide their own future. It's not for us to decide how that future should be developed. It's not for us to decide how Gaza should be governed. That is a matter for the people of Palestine, not of us. It's our solidarity with the people of Palestine that's so important. And the other wars that are going on in the world, the disaster of the war in Ukraine, the killing of soldiers from both sides, conscripted soldiers, the use of heavy weaponry, and the only beneficiaries in all of this are the world's arms companies that make enormous profits out of the misery of war and the arms trade. And the grab of the raw materials and resources of Yemen, of Sudan, of the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is what the basis of all this is about. Surely, we have it within ourselves to be something different. And so, your party will be on the side of people around the world who are fed up with living in poverty, fed up with seeing their natural resources stolen by the rich and powerful nations, and are fed up with the endless wars that are going on. So let's not allow the rich and powerful to disempower us. Let's empower ourselves by our unity of coming together. Think back to those people in the 19th century, in mill towns all over West Yorkshire, who felt they had no power against the overwhelming power of the wealthy and the mill owners. They fought back. They formed trade unions, and they changed society, and it ultimately changed the world as a result of it. That is the situation we're in today. So let's make sure that we build that unity. And sometimes things happen unexpectedly. The election of Zoran Mandani in New York was a great fill-up to people all over the world that showed, despite everything that was thrown at him, he was able to win that election. The way people were able to fight back for justice within our society. We can fight back to win. We can defeat Farage and the far right. We can do it by our unity of all communities. We stand together, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, together for the kind of society we want to live in. We do not want to live in a society divided on all of that. That is our purpose. That is our job, and that is what I am determined that we will do. I want our party to be successful. I think we need to look at some of the structural issues. I think we need a leadership that's elected directly by its members and accountable to its members. That's a change we can make later on, and I think we need to have the loyalty of membership directly to your party in the future. These are issues that are going to come up in debate within the party. What I just want to say to end this is, let us all get together to get our party back on track. Let us get together to say, we will build a party for the many. Thank you very much.